almost immediately after we were notified that our daughter Shannon was killed, stories started coming out emanating from the police department, originally from the commissioner himself, that raised questions. Our daughter was attacked by a rapist in the middle of the night. She was in her own apartment and broke into her apartment. Next door neighbor heard her scream for help, called the police. They were there in 6 minutes. The neighbors could not convince the two officers that it was Shannon that had screamed or Shannon they heard scuffling in her apartment.
Welcome back to Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you tonight?
I'm good, Ray. I know we have some guests. I'll let you introduce them, but I just want our audience to know today we are stepping into a different kind of territory. Usually as profilers, behavioralist investigators, we spend time looking at the who and the why of a killer. But today we're looking at the why of a system that often fails the very people it's sworn to protect.
You know, in our last episode, things got real. Jeff Buziak, the father of Lindsay, joined us. And Jeff, we want to say clearly to you that we heard you. And so did a lot of our listeners. We hear the frustration and exhaustion and skepticism in your voice. For 18 years, you've been told to trust the system, trust the process, while the process has left your daughter's murder unsolved.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal here at Cold Red is to find the person who took Lindsay, who killed Lindsay, and to help bridge that gap, we brought in two men who understand the story of justice better than just about anyone.
Yeah, joining us tonight, two of my favorites, right? Syl Schieber. Many of you remember Syl from our season 7, the Center City rapist case. Syl fought for his daughter Shannon against a wall of silence and the police misstep for years. He's here because he recognizes something in Jeff's voice last week and the week before that he felt in his own heart and soul.
And with him also is our longtime Cold Red alum, retired Philadelphia police detective Chuck Boyle. Chuck, 50 years now, we've been friends, right?
That's
Hard
correct,
to believe,
Jim.
Hard to believe, ever since the cradle, right?
That's right. Down at Strawberries is a store detectives.
Department store, yep. But anyway, he's the man who had the courage to look Syl in the eye back in the day and admit when the system he represented was wrong. He's here to offer a perspective most families never get to hear, the view from behind the blue wall.
You know, Jim, today is not just about the evidence, it's about accountability. It's about what happens when a father's grief meets an investigator's honesty. So when we look back at the last episode, Jeff, you know, we acknowledge that the system doesn't treat victims' families as partners. They're more, I would say, they're more of an obstacle. They get in the way and they don't really care about them. Now, I can't speak to that because, like Chuck, I was on that other side, but a person that can speak to that is Syl Schieber. Syl, from the Center City rapist case, he can talk about that. He can talk about what it's like. And so why don't you kind of run from there, what it was like for you? And I know you and Jeff have already talked.
Well, almost immediately after we were notified that our daughter Shannon was killed, stories started coming out emanating from the police department, originally from the commissioner himself, that raised questions. Our daughter was attacked by a rapist in the middle of the night. She was in her own apartment. He broke into her apartment. Next door neighbor heard her scream for help, called the police. They were there in 6 minutes. The neighbors could not convince the two officers that it was Shannon that had screamed or Shannon they heard scuffling in her apartment. And those officers left. They were on the scene for 5 minutes. The next day, the police commissioner went out in the press conference. Shannon was found dead the next afternoon, or later that same day, that afternoon. She was attacked at 2 o'clock in the morning. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, our son was passing through town. She had failed to show up for lunch. And he went over to her apartment, managed to get the neighbor that had heard her scream for help and had called 911 the night before to come down and let him into the apartment building. And they went up and they broke open the door. He was laying face down naked on her bed, dead. The police commissioner went out later that day or on Friday, actually, I guess it was the next day, and held a press conference. And he said that the two officers that arrived on the scene that night, they'd done an inspection of the property. They had, they had summoned a senior officer to the scene and confirmed that they should not break down the door. The officer started asking the neighbors if the sounds couldn't possibly have come from down the street or somewhere else. And so the commissioner was making statements that were inconsistent with what the neighbors told us that the fellow that called 911. And we could not find anyone who would tell us that the detectives we were talking to would not confirm that there was a senior officer on the scene. In fact, they were telling us that that was simply not true. So all of a sudden we had questions just at the outset, and we started raising questions. We could not get official questions through the police department. So then we attempted to make connection with the mayor's office. We got through to a special assistant and told her what our concerns were. She actually wrote the mayor and said that we had legitimate concerns, and she recommended that he meet with us. And he told her to send a message back that he would never meet with us on the case. So we decided we would just go sit outside his office, and we could encounter him. We made the mistake of telling him exactly when we were going to arrive, and he was not there, but we met with his chief of staff, and we explained to the chief of staff our concerns and the inconsistencies we were getting relative to what the official statement of the police was. And he wrote the mayor and said that we had legitimate concerns and he ought to meet with us. They sent back a message that they were not going to answer any more of their questions, and they hoped that we did not do anything that would embarrass ourselves. So fairly quickly, we came to the realization that if we wanted to really find out what was going on, we were going to have to force it out of them. And the only way we could do that was through a legal procedure. And we actually did bring a lawsuit against the city. Of course, the city fought us aggressively throughout that process, but ultimately they had to turn over information that showed not only was there no senior officer called to the scene, but also blew a hole in the explanation of what went on between the two officers and the neighbors outside Shannon's door as she was being strangled to death.
Jeff, let's run over to Jeff a little bit here, Sil. And I want to just run to Jeff and say, Jeff, you see Sil here, and he's going through his story, and it's an unbelievable story. But he's a father just like you are. You both lost your daughters, and a system that really didn't work, or at least wasn't working for you, and wasn't working for Sil and his family either. But eventually, because of the things that he's done, and I'm sure he's talked to you about some of those things, his daughter's killer was brought to justice, despite a lot of missteps by the police department. With that said, does that change your view on the process, better or worse, Jeff?
No, it doesn't. First, I'd like to give my sincere condolences to Mr. Schieber. I'm sorry for your loss, sir, and thank you for sharing. What I hear, gentlemen, is the frustration you have trying to deal with law enforcement and the pushback you receive if you try and hold them accountable. Mr. Schieber took a path of accountability for the police that I've chosen not to do at this point. I may in the future. He decided early on that the police needed to be held accountable, and I could see clearly they resist that a lot. The harder you push, the harder they push back. I've heard everything from I had officers travel to the city I live in and threaten me to stop what I was doing or they would destroy me. I had another officer tell a friend of mine they have looked at everything they possibly could to try and arrest me for something and they couldn't find anything. They repeatedly told me basically to shut up, go home and let them do their job. And my response is, but you're not doing your job. We got killers loose in the community. So what I see here and what I hear from Mr. Schieber is certainly the frustration of dealing with law enforcement who don't like to be held accountable. Are they doing their job? We could debate that for the rest of the day. I feel no. 18 years? No. It doesn't take that long to accomplish any task, especially with modern day technology. So I stand firm on that. I stand firm, as I told the officer I spoke to today from Saanich Police, do your job and I'll go away. It's that simple. You want me to go away? Make some arrests. And they give you some crap about they're working on it, but they're not. When you ask them point blank, are you assigned today to work on that case? No, but I monitor it. Well, I can monitor world affairs, and that doesn't mean anything. You can monitor whatever you want. Unless you're working on it, boots on the ground, nothing's happening as far as I'm concerned. So I'll be quiet, but my focus is holding them accountable publicly. Hence, I'm on this wonderful show with you great gentlemen. And I think that's the most effective thing you can do is hold them accountable by exposing them to the public, because the public is brainwashed to believe police work hard every day trying to solve cases. They're human. They don't. I feel there's a system called top loading. They put a whole bunch of energy and effort into it in the beginning. And if that doesn't produce results, budgets don't allow them to proceed any further. And so they don't. They sit around and monitor it, hoping it solves itself. Then they jump out as heroes saying, we're like dogs on the bone. We've never let go. And it's a load of crap, what I've experienced in 18 years.
If I can, thank you for that, Jeff. We're going to put an invitation out to the Saanich PD. We'd love to know if they'd consider coming on this podcast, and that'll be in the next few episodes. But Chuck, I want to bring you into this here. We've discussed over the summer of 2025 over about 20 episodes of Cold Red. Of course, the Schieber case and everything they went through, and your pivotal role in it, along with the Boulder, Colorado authorities. And it was interesting your evolution from defending the Philly PD to acknowledging the missteps in the Center City rape case. So, Chuck, you were on the other side of the fathers we have here, Jeff and Sil. What did you realize later about why the police became defensive or secretive in these situations?
Well, first off, my condolences. Mr. Schieber knows what I feel about him. Mr. Buziak, the same thing.
Thank you.
Nobody can tell either one of you what you've gone through. And thank you, Ray and Fitz, two of the best in the business. And I mean that. So what I've learned over the years, and I'm probably not the most popular guy sometimes with police departments, but police bosses up top can circle the wagons better than the TV show Wagon Train to keep the Indians out. When they feel there's missteps in there, and in Mr. Schieber's case, early on, my partner and I, we were in what they call special investigation. Some people would like to call it cold case. We were special investigation. We were split up and my partner was given the job. And they brought a new lieutenant in, and I'll give his name, Kaluzzi, from special or sex crimes unit at the time. And I was brought in at the end of the summer. So this happened in May of 98. The DNA came back and said that the markers in it were a black male. There was plenty of DNA evidence there. There was blood, semen. So the crime scene was well preserved. The original detectives interviewed the people there. And then that summer, they put a task force together with 10 detectives who worked 12 detectives that worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. And they were looking for a black burglar. They figured it was a crime of opportunity. Sometime in October, Mr. Schieber had filed the lawsuit. We never got a chance to talk to Mr. Schieber or his family, the son or whatever, because our lieutenant said he would handle the Schieber family. We would have no contact. And then in October, we were given court orders that we had to sign stating that we would have no contact with the Schieber family, which, as it turns out, set the investigation back. At that point, my partner typed up a memo asking for any DNA. So what happens is any crime scene that's processed where there's DNA that can be did, it's given to the lab. But unless you have an arrest, they don't test it. So in January of 09, it came back that there were 2 rapes
99.
in Center City within blocks of Shannon's apartment, So this would be one of the highest priced neighborhoods in Philadelphia, Rittenhouse Square, that DNA matched the killer in her apartment. And the one job was considered a burglary, and the second job was considered a an investigation of premise. So these murders happened or these rapes or sexual assaults that weren't coded that way happened in 1997. And then a couple months later, or the following October, two more came where there were these were actual rapes that happened in August. The first two were August, then there was one in July and one in June. But what happens is they all match. Well, it turns out that the lieutenant that we were working for was the lieutenant of special victims in sex crimes unit, and never told us about these sexual assaults. And as it turns out, in September of 1997, the suspect who we eventually arrested, Troy Graves, was stopped in that area by police for a call that came in that he was peeking through windows. So he started asking people. So he was going for his next victim when they stopped him. And the police knew nothing about these sexual assaults. So they ran him. There was no warrants on him. They let him go. Following May, because he always seemed to come out in the spring, summer, because girls would keep their windows open. He would follow these girls around. I mean, he did his homework. They didn't have boyfriends staying over. They didn't have pets. So now it's 1998, Shannon was murdered. Then everything goes cold. And in 1999, in August, Labor Day weekend, we get a call that there was another sexual assault. My partner and I went down to that, and we knew right away it was him. He was back. As it turns out, this girl happened to come. Her dad moved her in that day. It was a Friday. Moved her in because she was going to live with four other girls in this house, and it was they were going to go to school. But the girl that lived in that house all summer, that worked on Rittenhouse Square, lived there alone. So the night she walks home that Friday night, but instead of going home, she veers off to go to a party. He goes right down to the house, takes bars off the window, goes in, sees this girl, and then he sexually assaults her. He makes her perform oral sex, and then he has her spit it out in a pillowcase. He ties her hands up. He always choked them, like just to the point of unconsciousness, and then dropped the pillowcase with all the DNA on top of her. So it was like a screw you to the Philadelphia Police Department. He leaves and joins the Air Force in September that year. And then he ends up in Fort Collins, where I think he committed at least 7 to 8 more rapes. And we could have stopped him if we had known about these prior assaults. And maybe if the police department that summer knew about it, that the captain would have put us, because he was good, Captain Dishkovsky, they might have caught him that night, brought him in, took his DNA, and this would have never happened. So the police department is just great at, like, if they're under attack, and same thing with Saanich and everything else, they circle the wagons. They don't want to be told what to do. And what I never said, if we had had the ability to talk to the Sheebers, we would have been able to talk to Sean and know that the sliding glass door was open, which meant that he was in there when those police officers were at that door. He was in there. He got caught, and no supervisor turned up. He was at a different thing, and he didn't bother to show up. And then there was all this misinformation, and it's just sometimes tough to deal with supervisors that, I like to think that we were good at what we did. And I've researched this case as much as I could. I haven't seen the case file, but this is about as similar as it comes.
Chuck, let me ask you this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, has a population of about 400,000 people.
Correct.
And they have...
No, that's Greater Victoria. Saanich has around 70,000.
All right, Saanich has 70,000, which is even less. But just look at the Victoria area, and just in Saanich, I think in 2008 there was one homicide. That was Lindsay.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
And in Philadelphia, you got 1.2, 1.3 million people, and you're looking anywhere, depending on the year, between 350 and 550,
400.
600. The average is usually around 400 homicides a year. Chuck, based on your experience as a homicide detective and the number of homicides you're looking at, are the Saanich PD at a disadvantage because
No.
of lack of investigative experience in those types of cases?
I would think so. So here in Philadelphia, we have what they call 3 squads, 24 hours a day, 12 detectives in each squad, and they can get anywhere from 10 to 12 jobs a year, right? And the reason we were in SIU was if they were close on a job, but they got another job, we would come in and assist them, go out. And then if we had enough to make an arrest, because when we have to have facts. There's 3 words I hate. I hate the word closure for a family. When do they put their loved one in a box and shove it away? The second one is justice. Justice happens in the courts. I have no control over it. My job as a detective is to get to the truth, find out what happened, right? And in this case, I'll give an example. In this case, one of the sergeants went on TV and stated that they believe that their motive was that she was a drug informant. And it was a major drug arrest in January of 2008 in Calgary. The problem I have with that is that there's no facts that say she was involved in anything. I'm looking for the right word. You can help me. Like they believe,
They believed it was a theory. It was a theory.
Yeah, that's it. A
They
theory.
hypothesize.
So every detective that I ever worked with, we went on facts. But there were some detectives that, a job would come in and say, oh, it has to be drug related. We have a theory. Theories, that ain't fact. Because if you start with a theory, you're going to try to prove that your theory's right and maybe miss what's off on the other side. So he says his theory is now that nobody on the Victoria or in Saanich had anything to do with it, the people over there, that it was this drug murder. Well, my problem is that phone was bought in November. So what did they do? They keep the phone so in case somebody rats them out, that they go out? That makes no sense. The phone that makes the phone call is bought in November. The drug arrest isn't until January. That makes no sense. And I'll give you an example. In the city of Philadelphia, this is a theory. On the city of Philadelphia, on December the 28th, 2000, there was a job in the 800 block of Lex Street, which was a project, a big high crime drug area, where 10 people were put in a circle inside a house. It was a drug house. And they were all shot in the head. They went from ages 54 to 15, okay? And all shot in the head. 4 males come in to, they think, commit a robbery, okay? But it's definitely has to be drug related. So in January of 2001, they arrest 4 males. They take a statement off one and they make an arrest. A couple of weeks later, they have a preliminary hearing. They're held for court. And then they're going to be tried in the fall of 2001. Well, during the summer, before the trial, homicide receives a phone call from an informant that says, you should go down and check this roof in South Philly. They give the address. So they go down, they go up on a ladder, and sure enough, they find shell casings up on the ladder. They gather the shell casings, turn them into the firearms examination unit, which I think we have one of the best. And lo and behold, they match the spent casings that were found at Lex Street. So now they have to go in and just imagine if you're the district attorney for this, you have to ask charges be dropped against the other 4 males and they're taken out. In 2002, they arrest 4 other males. One gives a statement and he's going to testify against the other 3. It goes to trial. 3 of them are convicted of first-degree murder, but they're not given the death penalty. It was a death penalty case. And by that first case, those other 4 guys that were let go, they were looking at the death penalty. The other guy was given 15 to 30. Motive for that case was one of the males, the 18-year-old male that was killed, had traded a car to a guy for a gun. The guy that got the car was one of the 4 guys, that goes in there, turns the clutch out of the car. So he wants the gun back and the money that he paid for the car. And the kid says, no, I'm not giving you anything back. So that night, 4 of them go in to get the money back and one of their guys' masks fall off. So they say they had to kill everyone there. So they shoot 4. Theory was it was drug related. That job, notorious job, was over a burned out clutch in a car. So when you come up with a theory, you lose all your focus can go. You're trying to prove your theory, and all the evidence is over here.
You know,
That's the way I feel.
we're mid-February right now of 2026, and there's a woman who was taken from her home in Tucson, Arizona about 2.5 weeks ago. We're not going to get into that case, of course. That's not what we're here to, but there's a lot of theories about that. Ray and I have been on TV trying to dispel theories and just work with the evidence that we can see based on our experience. It is and there's a lot of experts, quote unquote, out there in the first week or two with these theories, and they've sort of obviously been proven wrong in what they're saying. So yeah, theories can get in the way of a case. It's okay in the back of your head to look at some theory, then look to build evidence of that theory, but you can't get horse blinders. You can't be stuck looking in one direction after another. And again, like the case everyone knows about with Nancy Guthrie, is it a kidnapping for profit, a stalker for the daughter? Is it a neighbor situation, random? There's all kinds of answers out there, and it may not be any of the things I just mentioned. And that applies to the different cases here. And now back to Lindsay Buziak. The theories are out there, but I'll tell you what, it comes back to 40, I heard maybe upwards of 50 stab wounds. That's not a professional hit or taking someone out who is a possible emphasis on that, informant to the police or whomever, or rip somebody off. That's done for other reasons. There may be some theories out there, but I'd rather rely on the evidence at this point in time. So thank you, Chuck, for walking us through some other different type cases, but to see and let our audience know that it's not always what it seems, but you still want the police to stay on top of it. They did in that case. You guys did, and I said Boulder before. Of course, I meant Fort Collins, Colorado. Those officers did in the Center City rapist case. But now, 18 years later, what do we have in Lindsay's homicide case? Not a whole lot. And
But
Jeff, it doesn't frustrate anyone more than you, we know.
The officer that we had on the series looking into Shannon's murder from Fort Collins, I think explains some of the issues that may be in play in Lindsay's case. Fort Collins at the time had, I don't know, 50 officers or so. And they had a small number of detectives that could handle these major crimes against people. I went on to the Saanich Police Department's website over the weekend. Today they have 161 officer positions in their department, and another 60 people. You go back to 2008, it undoubtedly was even smaller than that. It's a small police department. My hunch is they only have a handful of detectives that will work these sort of cases. They don't come along very often. They don't have a lot of experience. But it sounds to me like there's maybe a couple of detectives that are getting rotated across this case over time, so you don't have kind of a sequence of knowledge that the detectives are developing, and you simply don't have many resources to devote to it. And it looks, at least from what Jeff has said and some of the things I have seen, that they've been extremely reluctant to go in and really embrace outside help in terms of developing their evidence.
There's a lot of things in this case. Jim's already stated it, that Lindsay was specifically selected.
No doubt.
This is not a random act.
Absolutely.
No.
This is not something that she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was set up. This was planned. There's some pre-offense behavior here. Here's the thing that Jim and I focus on a lot in a lot of these cases. We focus on the victimology. And what I talk about is the background of the victim, Lindsay. In other words, and this goes back to what you said early on, Jeff. You said, Lindsay told you, Dad, I seen something I shouldn't have seen. And you said, well, what is that, Lindsay? And she says, let me work through this, Dad, and then I'll let you know. But I'm going to take care of it. That tells me there's something back there that may have been the reason of why they came after Lindsay, for whatever that was. But the victimology, if the police go back and interview people, and I mean, people say like, well, based upon what we learned in the Center City rape case with Shannon Schieber, what is it that we can apply from that case to this case? And that is go back. I mean, look at the surroundings of what's going on. Look at other incidences that have occurred in the area. If they had done that, it would have been something that probably would have saved Shannon's life. If they had done this, this thing would have been closed. And here's the other thing. Because they don't have the experience, and I'm not holding that against them, then by all means, reach out for help. And I know they've talked to some people, but bring in the BAU from the FBI. Those guys are very, very good at what they do down there. They're very, very good. We've also made the offer on the table with the BDOC Society, which someone sent an email, said that, and I'm not going to get into that, that's for another time, but that they did talk to someone from the BDOC Society. That's not true, because Jim and I would have been aware of that because we're both full members of that unit. And Chuck, you talked about a lot of things when we talked on the phone about this case that you thought you had problems with. To be honest and to be polite, you said, "Why is this happening? Why is that happening?" Why don't you share some of those things, Chuck?
Okay, so Saanich and Victoria Island or Vancouver Island and that whole area is in British Columbia, massive area. 2008, they had the most murders they had in 25 years. They had 140 murders. You know how many murders they had in Saanich in 2008? One. Her murder. She was the only one murdered. So they only have one job, her job. And then when this happens, she is up at the Shawnigan Lake house and she's not happy there, right? And something must happen. And she, at the end of August, she leaves that and comes back to Victoria and gets a condo in Victoria. When she said to Jeff, saw something I shouldn't have seen, that immediately says to me, has nothing to do with drugs or anything like that. She saw a murder. That's the only answer it could be. She saw something she shouldn't have seen. She saw a murder. Now, the only thing I noticed up at Shawnigan Lake was a Kyle McDermott. And Kyle McDermott was in this grow weed business up in there. And he, on August 30th, or I think it was August 30th, he's going to go on a fishing trip with some buddies and he has to meet them in Calgary. So he says that his girlfriend, or the girlfriend says she drops him off and he's going to take a plane over to Calgary. And supposedly he gets there, but he disappears and he's never seen again. He's still missing. But what happens is the girlfriend and the father don't report him missing for 5 weeks. When the mother is contacted, this is what she says. She says that her son, she said, I knew something like this would happen, right? Because he had a $450,000 house, a $60,000 truck in 2008, and he had no job. Wow. And he's never seen from again. He's also dealt with a guy that was named Ziggy Matheson, knew Jason Zylo, right? Who actually, the mother had rented a house to him, I think around Shawnigan Lake, okay? And now you go into that day. The house at 1702 D'Souza house wasn't actually Lindsay's listing. She was a junior realtor. There were two other girls at the two different offices. I think there was one, I'm not sure. I have a Philadelphia accent, so I'm sure people can't understand me. But there were two different offices, and there were two different girls that handled the listings. I believe their names were Laura and Nancy, and they worked in two different offices. But somehow, and by the way, the house was taken off of a list, off the sale market in December of 2007, and then put on the market again on January the. And then all of a sudden, she gets a phone call on her cell phone. Might not be, that strange. My problem is that she gets this phone call and she keeps her notes and says the woman had like an accent. It was a little wacky. She couldn't make it out. And then that her husband had what do they call it, Mr. Buziak? That
A corporate
real estate,
transfer.
a corporate transfer, that he was, and that they needed a $1 million house, that they needed 3 bedrooms, a place for a maid, and all these requirements. Well, lo and behold, the only house that fits that is 1702 D'Souza, right? So they have to close the sale in 2 days. So she gets this phone call, I think like January the 30th, and it's going to close in 2 days. And she has a kind of a feeling in her head that something's not right about this. Don't like the accent. She even calls her dad. Okay. Then she tells Jason, right? And, he says that she never seemed worried about the house, but she told everybody else she was. Okay. And then she is going to meet, they make it, we're going to come on the 2nd and we'll meet you at 5:30 at dusk. Okay. So she's going to have the listing and she goes out to lunch. Well, Friday night, Shirley, the mother of Jason, goes over to the condo and Jason's playing hockey. And the mother and Lindsay go out for dinner. And she says that Lindsay was talking about it, excited, never said anything about being worried about it or, anything was wrong. And so they leave it at that. And then the next day, she meets Jason for lunch and they settle the bill at $424. And he says to her, I'll be there at 5:30. And he leaves and she goes back to her condo or whatever, and she's going to get dressed. But earlier that day, she went to the main headquarters of the Remax and went upstairs and was talking to other realtors up there and said, I'm really worried about this. I got a bad feeling and everything else. Now, Jason and the mother say she never worried about it, never said anything to them about it, but she says it to these people. And one of the realtors there that overhears it, I think his name was Dan, was a former Royal Canadian.
His name was Cal Faber.
Oh, Cal Faber was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police that was retired. He was in the real estate business now. And he said, that doesn't sound right. I'll go with you. And she says, no. Jason said he would go with me. Okay. So she leaves and goes. Jason leaves, picks up this guy, Cohen Ottman, right? And these guys ended up in this mortgage business together with another guy. I think Greg Melville, was his name?
Greg Martell.
He turns out to be the biggest Ponzi. What's that?
Greg Martell.
Greg Martell, Chuck.
Turns out the biggest Ponzi scheme ever in Canada. And he flees the country and he's supposedly over in Dubai. But that has not. So what happens now is he goes to this auto dealership to have some kind of paper signed that doesn't really need to be signed. And he's with Ottman. And he then decides to let Lindsay, he's on camera at 5:28. So he's not going to be there at 5:30. And they leave to go up to the Sousa, the two of them. And he sends her a text, I'm on my way. But I don't think he gets up there till 5:38. Okay. Now, in the meantime, a neighbor sees this couple come around the corner and walk up. And Lindsay's by her car. She has papers on the car. She goes over, shakes hands with the couple. Guy's about 6 foot, white male. And the woman has on a dress that really stands out. They actually got the original dress and dressed the mannequin with it. So you wouldn't miss this dress if you saw it. She has blonde hair and they go into the house. And the reason they know that is the lockbox clicks at 5:30. Okay. Jeff's phone call is, or text message is 5:31. But he gets there and first off, he says that he saw a male or somebody in the front door, and behind the glass door. But the glass door is like molted or whatever. It's kind of tough to see in there. And then he says that he doesn't want to go in because it's her sale. But she had asked him to be there. It wouldn't be unusual for somebody to walk in and say, oh, yeah, I'm in a real estate business with Lindsay. I'm just here. But he doesn't do that. He goes down the cul-de-sac and he keeps the car faced that way towards the end of the cul-de-sac. And he looks back. Then he thinks he sees the guy come out and go back in the house. Now he waits 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He starts calling Lindsay again. There's no answer. He turns the car around, pulls up in front, and they go up to the house. And the door's locked. He looks in, he sees her shoes on the floor, which is not unusual. He can't get the lockbox open. Supposedly, I don't know, he called his mom to give the code for some lock, and it doesn't work. At this time, Cohen's going around the house looking, and he sees on the left side of the house that butts up to Tourday Place, the sliding glass door open. So he tells Jason, the sliding glass door, Jason boosts them up, okay? And he goes in, comes to the front door, opens the front door, and he goes looking down in the first floor, going towards the kitchen, and Jason calls up and goes immediately up to the bed, up the stairs to the bedroom. Okay. Now, with the neighbor that saw that, nobody ever saw a car. Nobody ever saw a car that couple came up in. They can't say there was a car parked around the corner. Nobody saw a car. So how did they get there, right? And supposedly with the cell phone, they came over the night before, right? Off of the ferry. Where did they stay? Can't go to a motel, hotel, or whatever without a credit card. Wouldn't you check all the places, right? And then with that dress, they come up. So of course she stands out. How did they get up there? I don't think they had like those services at that time where you could call up. Maybe they did, but did they take a cab or whatever? And those things, you have to make a phone call, give them a credit card. So how did they get up there, right? And now what happens is when they go in, she is, what they say from the autopsy, she was stabbed in the spinal thing and severed. And then she had multiple stab wounds. Now, the autopsy to me doesn't make sense because there's a manner and cause of death. I don't care where you go. Okay. So the manner of death is homicide. Cause of death is multiple stab wounds. But then the medical examiner has to identify every stab wound. They have to go, just like if we had multiple gunshots, we would go to hospital. We had to do a body chart. You have to, every hole in that person, you have to document, okay? And the medical examiner would do that. There's no way he puts a thing and says, cause of death is multiple stab wounds, and that's it. No, it's not. That's not how it works. I don't care where you go. But what happens is when they go in, he says that he goes to touch the body, and he's about to say something. I don't know if he was going to say the body was cold or whatever, because that body was still warm. And at 6, the police were already, and by the way, before he went in, when he went up to the door, he made a phone call to 911, said, I couldn't get into the house. What? You call 911 because your girlfriend's inside the house probably doing a showing, and you're going to call 911, and we're going to go into the house. And then at 6:11, they're up in the bedroom, and makes a call to the police, and they come. They were already en route, but they come, and she's on the bedroom floor. Obviously, she's deceased, and police, we can't like pronounce somebody. You have to either have an ambulance show up, a medical examiner, they're taken to the hospital, and the doctor pronounces. So an ambulance is called, and it was a male and a female that were in the ambulance, and the female's driving. Her name was Lisa. And she says that they pull up, and her partner says, you wait here, I'll go in. So she went around, turned the ambulance around, and she watched what she said was the most uncontrolled crime scene I have ever seen. Cops are going in and out and everything else. Now, look, we had that over the years where back in the day when we would go in, you'd see a cop using a person's house phone or putting a cigarette out in an ashtray. And then, you say, did you touch anything? No, I didn't touch anything. Next thing you know, we find their fingerprints inside the house. So the ideal situation is when you get there, the police, first officer on the scene, she's upstairs, get out, start a log, right? Nobody's in there, right? You've done a check, start a log, don't let anybody in. If you're a detective, the first person you want in there is the crime scene technician with the camera. Photograph that scene, a version scene. Photograph everything in that scene, right? So the ambulance guy goes up and he pronounces her at 6:17. He comes out and says to his partner, that's the most bloody scene I've ever seen. And you don't want to go in there, okay? So they don't go in. Now, the police, right, then like the detectives come and everything else. So the thing is, if that's the most bloody scene, where did this couple go? Did they have blood all over them, right? Or was there somebody else already in the house up on the second floor? They're talking to her in the bedroom, and her back's faced to the door because they know that, the door of the bedroom. Does somebody come up behind her? I'm just putting it out there. Or you can believe that this couple, right, had to have blood on them, and they leave. Where did they go? They're not going back to the ferry with that dress on. Anybody would see that, would say, oh my God, yeah, I remember that lady with the dress. So somewhere, they either had to have a car somewhere or somebody picked them up and took them away, right? But a lot of the story doesn't make any sense. You know, one person says, oh, no, she wasn't worried at all. And other people were saying, man, she asked, you know, she was all nervous and shaken about this and everything else. You know, she even called her father up to say, you know, there's something not right about this. You know, I know the San Antonio police ain't going to like me, but, you know, put on your big boy pants and stuff. That's, you know, this is no joke. And, you know, you got to keep digging. You just have to keep digging. And then what I don't understand is they come out and I believe it was they come out and hold a news conference after this thing, say that that Jason Zylo is cleared of this investigation. Then it come out later and say that Shirley and son, so everybody in the Zylos are cleared of this investigation. They have handcuffs on anybody? You don't clear anybody of this investigation. And then they try to say, well, it's an active investigation. It's not a cold case investigation. 18 years later, it's cold. It's cold. And you have to have detectives working on that every day, bringing people back in to interview them. And you can't tell me that a little town of Xanax with 70,000 people, that somebody out there doesn't know exactly who did this. They know. Somebody out there has to come forward and say, this is what I know. I mean, it's just, I think at the present time, they have a police chief or whatever you want to call it, and 7 inspectors out of those 160 people. I mean, a lot of bosses, you know, and my thing is that if you can't take, like, as a cop, as a police officer, uniformed detective, you're paid to take shit off people. You are. It comes with the turf, right? I've had cases where I hated the family, but I always kept them informed, always talked to them. I kept them informed. I let them know this is, you know, and so you're to take, like, we don't like Jeff. They come up with a theory, but nothing to back it up. It just doesn't, to me, make any sense. And then they said that they think it like 15 years or so. They said, yeah, like we have the RCMP and we have the FBI helping us on a case. FBI, let me tell you something, because I dealt with Fitz and Jimmy on the Schieber case.
And Ray.
I mean, what did I say?
That's all right.
Fitz
There's
and
only
Jimmy.
one of me. I'm Jim Fitz.
Fitz and Jimmy.
He's been known to, you know, to split in half. You know what I mean?
There you go.
That's right.
Good.
That's correct. And when we contacted you guys on the Schieber case, we were told that this is one thing the FBI, the behavioral science unit, they'll look at the case, but you have to give them everything. You can't give them, oh, here's 2 interviews and here's a sketch of the crime scene. You give them your whole case file and they have it down there. And then you go down to Quantico and you sit in a room with, I think our time was like 27 people in that room.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Psychologists, forensic people, pathologists, and they pick your case apart. Did you do this? Did you do that? And then you guys write up a thing. And what happened in the Schieber case, and both of you know, you said, have a community meeting in the Rittenhouse Square area, and maybe that suspect will show up. And sure enough, tell them, Ray.
When I pulled up that night to the church, I was parking out. I was about an hour before the meeting, getting there early, and Philly PD was going to put people early, plain clothes, out and about 35, 40 minutes beforehand. And I see this guy in a trench coat, and he looks just like the composite sketch. Of course, we didn't know who he was at the point, but he looked like the composite sketch. And I said, I'll be a son of a gun. That's him. So I could ask, excuse me. And he took off down some stairs, and I lost him. That's how fast he took off. And I know it was him. And I remember when you and Jeff Pyrie went out to Colorado, said, make sure you asked if he was there that night at the town meeting, at the community meeting, but you guys never had the opportunity to do that. You had too many other things you had to ask them. But Jeff, I want to ask you this.
Yes.
One piece of information or one access point. If you could get that one piece or one access point, what is it, what you feel is being withheld that could change everything?
Good question. Certainly what Lindsay saw, she shouldn't have seen. And if I can comment on that a little bit. Up until probably 2 years ago, police didn't believe me that Lindsay said that to me. They finally believed me with the current regime. Now, we've had 5 police chiefs and probably 6 heads of the file Lindsay's file, I feel, my assessment today, is it's used as a training file and a toy for Saanich police. When the officers get close to solving it or close to it, the chief will shut it down and use an excuse of funding or lack of manpower or reassign the officers because we need them elsewhere. And then we get somebody else to get trained on how to solve a murder, which they really don't know how to do. So the other thing is we talk about we don't know how the perpetrators got there or the couple. And I really pursued that recently with a police officer, and he said that's holdback and that the autopsy report is holdback because there's holdback information. All this stuff they claim is holdback or they won't release, even though they've been taken to court numerous times to release the information. All I can determine out of all of this is it's a cover up and they're hiding something. Now, since we talk about FBI and all that, one of my favorite uncles, Gus Buziak, his real name was August Buziak. He was one of the youngest detectives in the RCMP at the time. He's now deceased. He was one of two people in Canada chosen to go and train at the FBI headquarters in Quantico. And you gentlemen can look that up. He remained a detective for the rest of his career because he didn't want to be promoted high up. He loved being a detective. I went to him, and by now he's 80, let's say, retired. And I asked him numerous times about Lindsay's murder, and he just said, Jeff, I'm too old now, and I've been away from it a long time. And I kept asking the odd time. We were quite close, and he finally took me aside to his office where he had commendations from the Queen of England and the Prime Minister of Canada and all his stuff that he had earned as a detective. And he goes, okay, Jeff, without seeing the file, here's what went on. They fucked up. All the answers they needed were in that house. They fucked up, and now they're trying to play catch up or cover up. That's all I can tell you.
Can I say something? That scene, I agree with that. There had to be a blood trail out of that house. They had to be covered in blood. Like,
somebody did.
You just have the blood around her body. Like, nobody got cleaned up. They left. If there was nobody else in the house with them and it was just those two and they did this. And by the way, this was personal, 100% personal. She was the target and it was like they gave it to her. I hate to be like, but that's the truth. And so if it was like a drug hit cartel, they would go in and put two in your head, leave a note on top of your rat or snitch, like they do in Philly, snitches, and they'd be gone because they want the word out there that if you talk to the police, this is what happens to you. They're not going in there and killing some girl with 40 stab wounds and everything else. That makes no sense. This is personal.
So the problem
I would
we
love to look
really
at the
have
file.
here,
I know I never will.
the problem we really have here with Saanich police is they are known predators, and it's in the media. I could provide you with all kinds of information about that. The public are asked to provide them with information. The public are afraid of them. The public are actually more afraid of Saanich police than they are of criminals there. And so we have that problem going on. And of course, every time a new officer arrives, and we've had 5 police chiefs, by the way, and 6 or so heads of the file. And to understand Saanich police, the police chiefs are never hired from open competition. They are always appointed from within, and the police board is told who the next police chief is going to be. So, talking about the blue shield, the blue wall, I call it the blue line, they protect each other because now these police chiefs who have come up through the ranks and have done maybe inappropriate things, which Saanich are known to do, there's officers there that know about that. So it's almost like this little blackmail game within that group. Well, you can't do this because I know what you did. That goes on there. There is no fresh blood there. And to be a chief or inspector or higher, I am told you have to be part of the club or you don't get promoted beyond that. So that's what we deal with. The current police chief refuses to speak with me. All the others did. This one refuses. We are getting nowhere. We are getting nowhere with them. Today I spoke with the supposed lead detective, good guy. I believe he's working hard, whatever that means. And when I ask him about, are you working on the case again? Well, I monitor everything with the case. And I hear words like this from them all the time. So I finally say to him, look, are you actually assigned to that case full time? And that's what you do every day? No. So the reality is we have nobody working the case at this time. What we have is police BS talk, which I call cop talk, circle jerk, really, with them. They just say, oh, we're monitoring it all the time, and it's a very high priority for us. It is not anything for them but a toy and a training tool. That's what it is to them, and probably a cover-up. The harder I push, the harder I get pushed back, to the point where Shirley Zalo is suing me for libel and slander. And from one of the prominent law firms in Victoria, who likely connected to police, and it's their attempt to shut me up because they admit I didn't libel or slander her, but I supposedly published it. That's where we're at with this whole thing. It's going nowhere, but a bunch of talk that I've heard today. I heard the FBI, we don't need Vidoc and those profilers. We have the FBI. And I go, no, you don't. Like, don't tell me that. You don't have the FBI who has an office at your precinct. You maybe have them talking to you once in a while when you phone them for some advice.
Not sure if we lost Jeff. We'll get him back. But I'd like to get one more. I think, Chuck, you were about to say something, and maybe just go around the horn here one more time, because we're well over an hour, and I want to bring this to some kind of logical conclusion, and I have a few thoughts too. Chuck, you were about to respond to something that Jeff was saying.
Yeah, well, the thing of what, like when they keep saying about the FBI was involved, I mean, you guys still have connections there. You would know that. And the FBI, they're not going to call like an office in Seattle. They would say, okay, we'll call the behavioral. I'm sure they have a regional, what you guys were, the regional one that would call down to Quantico and say, look, we have this case here. But I can't believe that, the FBI is working with them. I mean, you tell me.
Well, let me say a few things.
Go ahead.
The RCMP has, and the different provinces of Canada, at least a few of them, I know the Ontario Provincial Police have great criminal profilers working there. We've trained them. They've done other training to people around the world, the Canadians, that is. They have their own force, their own profilers within Canada. And I know the BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, would be glad to help them in this particular case. But as we all know, it's technically it is a Canadian case. The FBI would have to be asked in. So I'm going to make, I'm kind of summarizing what I said in the last week or so. The VDOC Society would be great, but what they really need, and I'm looking at three people on the screen. We have between Ray, Chuck, and me, what do you think, a century of law enforcement experience?
Yes.
And some hardcore in the trenches type of stuff. And if you want to disagree with what I'm about to say, you're welcome to do this. Two things. And I forget his name. What's the name of the missing young man who went missing about a few months before the murder?
Kyle McDonald.
Kyle McDonald. If you want to solve this case, solve probably the homicide of Kyle McDonald. That's going to lead you to who very possibly killed Lindsay. Easier said than done. Welcome back, Jeff. We know we lost you. We're winding up some things here. Solve the case of McDonald, and you're going to wind up solving the case of Lindsay Buziak's murder. So that's the micro perspective, is solving the McDonald missing person thing. The macro, and here's the macro part. And we've said this last week about VDOC, FBI. This case, and I'm going to go with 100 years of experience here, and let Saanich come back and disagree. They have to give up this case and turn it over to the RCMP. Bring in folks from other provinces that have nothing to do with BC, British Columbia, and they have to work this case. It doesn't have to be 100 agents or detectives. Bring in a half a dozen detectives, profilers, analysts, and get all the records from Saanich PD. And Saanich can say, hey, fine, take the case over. We have other things to work here too. And of course, hopefully Saanich would turn everything over. I'm not here going to criticize corrupt or predators. I know that's been said here. I don't know that for a fact. And Saanich PD, you're listening, you're absolutely welcome to come on, even if you can't discuss the details of this case. But again, the micro perspective of this case, solve the missing person, McDonald person who went missing before Lindsay's murder. And macro, bring in another agency, Canadian, and turn this case over. Saanich, you have nothing to lose. And it may come out, hey, it's all you could have done. Maybe these other people can't solve it for whatever reason. But this is personal. And Chuck, you're saying personal, but I think it's not just like an ex-boyfriend girlfriend thing.
No.
They think she saw something, and she was the bitch that they didn't like because she may have said something to someone. Jeff, she was hinting to you she saw something, and of course, breaking up with the boyfriend Jason. There's a couple of things there. I'm not going to tie him in at this point, but
Right.
I mentioned now micro and macro, solve the missing person case. That'll lead you into who killed Lindsay, and another agency to do that. Another agency has to come in within Canada, and they could probably do this. They do it right. Half a dozen people, half a dozen months, 6 months. They'd be a lot farther, I am sure, than the Saanich PD is after 18 years.
And I agree 100% with you. And they have to start from the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Start re-interviewing, because here's the thing about people. You take an interview this day, you take an interview a month from now. People can remember the truth, but they can't remember their lies. So you sit there and you say, okay, tell me again what happened on that day or whatever. And then you have the ability to punch holes in it. Say, well, no, that's not what you said the first time. What? Like, your story's got to match because you can remember the truth. And I agree 100% that you have to put fresh eyes on this. And there's a lot of things that are going on that are going. I wanted to ask Jeff this because you guys know how I got involved in this, right? And I was talking to that person, and they told me that Lindsay's mom supported the Saanich police for a lot of years, but in 2025, when she found out that there were really nobody attached to that case, she came out and basically begged for people out there to give information, and she's kind of bitter about what the police have done.
Correct.
Now, Jeff, can it answer that?
Yes.
And here's a woman that all those years kept silent and supported the police. And then some inspector gets up and says, oh, we're actively working on this case. Because I read what he said, and that was just recently. And to me, that made no sense. We're actively doing this. We have this or that. No, you don't. No, you don't. You have it in-house, and nobody's working on it.
Yes, I can address that.
I'll throw this
The
out.
officers that were working on the case told both my ex and myself that they had been reassigned. And I specifically know how to ask which questions to make sure it's the truth. He said, yes, Jeff, I am been reassigned to another department because of a manpower shortage. So we are not working on the case. But then when they are questioned publicly by media or anybody else, they'll say, oh, this is very important. We're monitoring everything. And, just blah, 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 blah. They're not. And today, 15 minutes before this show, I spoke to that officer. He is not working the case at this moment. He is monitoring it. So that's where we're at with this. I have pursued the government to have it taken away from them. There's a major crime unit on Vancouver Island. They will not give it up. They would refuse to join the major crime unit when it was formed. They refused. And on the re-election of a mayor, I went public stating about them refusing to join. He saw in the end he was going to lose the election. So last-ditch effort, he joined the major crime unit. But they will not give up the case to the major crime unit. I talked to an assistant deputy minister of the government, and he said, what we'll do is assign a senior RCMP officer to oversee the case. And that provided nothing. He said, we're not going to take it away from them. They are going to maintain priority over the case.
Shame on them.
That's where we're at. They will not give it up. And as a matter of fact, recently I was told that they're trying to get rid of that RCMP officer because they find him a burden.
Our experience in Philadelphia was that when the police would not respond to our questions, when the city would not respond, that we had to figure out how to bring pressure against them, to force them to explain what happened to Shannon. And that led to major scandal, major revelation about how they were mishandling sexual assaults generally. We had two forces. We talked to the press and convinced them that there was something awry in that department. And they played a major role in unmasking what was going on. And then we used the legal system to force them to turn over to us how they were handling things. And once we had that, then we could make a case that they were complicit. They were complicit. We were bringing so much heat. You can ask Chuck.
Absolutely.
There was all kind of hell going on in the homicide unit. They had to solve this case, and they put massive resources into solving Shannon Cheever's murder, mostly because we were raising holy hell, both through the legal system and through the press. There were more than 150 press articles in Philadelphia in a 3 or 4 year period while this case was going on. And many of them were on the front page, top fold. And it was embarrassing.
We even used, and I remember this, and Fitz and Ray will notice, we even brought in a geographical profiler. He was from Vancouver, Canada, named Kim Rossimo.
Kim Rossimo, yep.
Correct. And so when we finally had a good chief, Chief Maxwell, and he put all the resources at this case, and you know, you guys, he thought the world of you guys and the FBI. And I mean, Ray, you were in it early, even that summer, you know, and you saw when you walked in that one time, they had the Shevers on a bench outside homicide, sitting on a bench. Yes. And anybody that's ever been in a homicide unit, it was a toilet. I mean, we had a word processor. We didn't have computers. No, listen, we did what we could do, you know, and we didn't worry about that stuff because the object of the thing was to get to the truth, you know? And we all have cases. I know one case in particular where a mother was shot, the boyfriend was shot and fell on top of her, and their 12-year-old daughter was the last one shot. And she was going to go to college. She was involved in polo. She was a young black girl. And the last thing that she saw was her mother and the boyfriend being shot. And I know who did the job. Now, we convicted him on another thing, and he got 50 to 100 years. I remember he said to Judge Means, the judge said, "Do you have anything to say? Do you have anything you'd like to say?" And he says, "Yeah, I'll see you again, Your Honor." And the judge says, "Not in this lifetime." So he ain't never getting out, right? But I know he did it, and I can't prove it. So you carry those kind of cases. Right now, I still think about that job. It's got to be 25 years ago, and it still eats at me.
Somehow you have to demonstrate to the public in that community that this police department is not doing their job. And once you do that, then the Royal Canadian Mounted Police will be invited in to help them do their job. And you'll probably make some progress in getting this solved. But you've got to, I'm sorry, your annual march is not what it's resulting in is the police chief won't talk to you. Okay. Somehow you've got to force their hand, and the press can help you.
I've spent 18 years trying to do that in every which way I possibly can. And the local media in Victoria are considered media partners to the police. So this past year at the annual walk, the two major media outlets in Victoria did not cover it. They just don't want any more bad press. Canadian media won't tackle it. Well, it's CBC. CBC is the national network, and we have CTV, we have Global.
No,
there is no single national newspaper.
Well,
no, not that I'm
You're thinking of the
aware
CBC, as Jeff was saying.
Yeah. So what's happened
Canadian
is,
Broadcasting Company.
You know, take into perspective, I've been on Dateline, Crime Watch Daily,
Capital
Discovery
Daily,
ID, and the Dr. Phil Show. We can't get any more exposure than that. I've had hundreds, thousands of people write in to the Premier of BC, the Minister of Justice, which I'm going to start a campaign again. I don't know anything more I can do. You can't force media to take this up. They have to be invited. They have to want to, just like you gentlemen have. I've reached out to all the Canadian media. They now kind of chastise me because they say you went to the American media. I didn't go anywhere. I was approached by
The Globe
American
and
media.
Mail.
So
Isn't the Globe and Mail
the
pretty
Globe
much a
and Mail.
national?
I've
Okay,
talked to Globe.
they actually did a series several years ago on how police across Canada were handling sexual assault cases. They actually featured Shannon's story in one of those an article in one of that series. If you get some real investigative reporters who understand what's going on and they start to really dig into this, they can uncover things that will get attention, that will change behavior. Dr. Phil isn't going to do any background work. He's going to sit there and glad hand you or lecture you about what you're doing, but he's not
Believe me,
going to do any
Sil, I've tried.
background.
Believe me, Sil, I've tried for 18 years to get other media in Canada involved, and they just won't. I don't know what else I can do. I email them, I talk to them.
Okay.
They're not interested. So I take what I get. And even though you say people like
Alternate media is the answer.
even
No,
though you
I'm
say
not
people
criticizing
like
you.
Dr. Phil are no good, it's the highest rated program on TV, reaching out to 42 countries around the world. So whether it's salacious or whatever you want to call it, it puts pressure on Saanich police
I'm not
because
saying that.
people from around the
All right.
world
Okay,
get
I'm sorry.
involved and start emailing politicians and police. And as far as we had one from the Vancouver Sun years back, David Bain, who's now retired, he tackled Saanich police because they were using a bizarre, bogus lie detector machine. And so they got rid of that. But the main thing with Saanich police is they really don't give a shit. And they're not interested in solving my daughter's murder. I don't care what you guys say. I've been there for 18 years. I know what's going on there.
I think we agree on that. We agree on that.
Okay, 7 senior officers
We want to wrap this
retired.
kind of up tonight, guys.
7 senior officers retired the day before Lindsay was murdered on a Friday. Saturday, she was murdered. Those 7 senior officers out of the
Jeff seems to have been frozen, but what I'd like to do is kind of, circle the wagons that we talked about. I think, Jim, you made some great suggestions on Saanich PD to be able to get them back on track. I think you made some, and I think, Sil, you made some suggestions that were out of this world, and so did you, Chuck. The thing that concerns me the most, it'll be my closing remarks here, is the fact that nobody is willing to talk about this. And I think that's what's frustrating, Jeff, is that you can't get people even to come on here and talk about it. Like they don't want to be affiliated with it because there must be something out there in the community that says there's going to be retribution. There has to be something like that out there.
There needs to be outside
That's
force.
one of the most concerning things to me is that you can't get community involvement other than doing a walk or something of that nature. But in the community, you don't have the involvement. I mean, look, so you wrote to me, you didn't mention it tonight, but the owner of that home, what Jeff said, the owner of that home said, hey, that bitch got what she deserved.
Who got what she deserved.
And he was the last one in the house that day.
I'm thinking,
because
what
he
the
was
heck
up
is
there. He
going
left
on?
around 5, and there's like in this case, Jeff and I would look at each other and say, "There's a lot of meat on the bone." I mean, I only did, and I didn't look at one side or anything. I tried to be fair and go through everything. And these are my notes here, just stuff that I found that you could look at, Yeah. And so when you go through it all, and I would love, like I say, you get in the file, and like if they brought what Fitz said, bring in fresh eyes, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and what they would do, good detectives would come in, they would start from the beginning, lay everything out, put a timeline together. Who do we need to interview? You know what I mean? And they would do it step by step. And they're not doing it.
And as I've always said on this program and elsewhere, allegiances after 10 to 15, almost 20 years change. The tough guy back in the day is now a little fat, bald guy who doesn't quite have the street creds and the toughness that he used to. So they go in there now 18, 19 years later and start interviewing people. They're going to find out that, the guy that everyone was afraid of, in 2008 is not the threat that he used to be. But it's not going to be, from everything I'm hearing, it's not going to be the Saanich PD that's going to put the fear of God, and maybe that's the wrong way of doing it, but, offer the right nuggets, positive reinforcement to get people to talk about this. So this absolutely, folks, if we have an audience in Canada who listens to this, you've got to work with us here. I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything criminal at this point, but another fresh set of eyes and not rookies at Saanich PD. There has to be, however the legislature in Canada works, or British Columbia, bring in RCMP, give them 6 months, 6 people to work this case from the very beginning, and I guarantee you'd be close to an arrest. We're certainly identifying the person or the group involved. Solve the missing kid case at the same time. McDonald, I'm calling him a kid, but to solve that person case, and it's going to tie in. I have a feeling that Lindsay knew something about what happened to him. Why don't we close it out here? And
we'll do.
I think we've covered there. Ray, what are we doing after this?
Well, next week, just a little bit of a preview. This is part 4 in our final part to this, where we're going to talk a little bit about the victimology. Then I'll give you a little bit about the behavior of the individual involved in this, and maybe a pathway of how we can move to the killer to find out who he is.
Okay. I certainly want to thank, we have 3 guests tonight. Jeff Buziak's been with us now for the third week in a row. Sil Schieber, and of course, Chuck Boyle. Thank you for making guest appearances. None of these are good and fun topics to discuss. And Sil, I know the memories this brings back for you and your family, but thank you. You're willing to pitch in any way, shape, or form you can, even in someone else's case, another father who's grieving and is frustrating as long as you, of course, almost as long as you, and all the frustration. So everyone else out there, thank you for listening or watching this episode of Cold Red. We're going to try to help solve this case of Lindsay Buziak from 2008. Follow us on our website, coldredpodcast.com. Like, subscribe, share, all those things. Thanks to our producers, Matt McDonald, Matt Robinson, music coordinator, Rick Schilling, Ray Carr, of course, will be my co-host here, and everybody again, check out the podcast, and we will see you next time on Cold Red.